Their honeymoon was a long shiver. Blonde, angelic and shy, the harsh nature of her husband froze her childish bright dreams. She loved him much, yet, at times with a light shudder when returning together in the streets at night, would take a furtive gaze at the tall height of Jordan, silent for the past hour. He, on his part, loved her deeply without demonstrating it. For 3 months, they married in April, they lived a special joy. Without a doubt, she would have wished for less severity in that stark haven of love, more expansive and candid tenderness. But the impassive demeanor of her husband readily contained her. The house in which they lived influenced their shuddering in no small measure. The whiteness of the silent patio, friezes, columns, and marble statues produced an autumnal impression of an enchanted palace. Within, the glacial brightness of the plaster, without the faintest scratch in the high walls, asserted that feeling of unpleasant coldness. When crossing from one room to another, the footsteps found their echo in the whole house, as if a long neglect had sensitized its resonance. In that strange love nest, Alice spent the whole autumn. Nevertheless, she concluded to draw a veil over her old dreams, and still lived asleep in the hostile house, not wanting to think anything until her husband came back. Her thinning was not out. She had a mild attack of influenza that dragged on insidiously for days and days. Alice never recovered. Finally, one evening, she was able to go out into the garden, leaning on his arm. She gazed to and fro indifferently. Suddenly, Jordan, with deep tenderness, ran his hand over her head, and Alice promptly burst into tears, throwing her arms around his neck. She cried longly, all her muted fright redoubling the crying at the slightest attempt of a caress. Then the sobbing slowed down, and still she remained hidden in his neck for a long time, without uttering a word nor moving. That was the last day Alice was up. The next day she woke up fainted. Jordan's doctor examined her very carefully, prescribing her absolute calm and rest. "I don't know," he said to Jordan by the doorstep, still in a low voice. "She has a great weakness that I cannot explain, and without vomit, nothing. If tomorrow she wakes up like today, call me at once." The following day, Alice worsened. There was an appointment. A very severe anemia was noted, completely inexplicable. Alice had no further faints, but she was visibly creeping towards death. The bedroom had the lights on all day long and was in complete silence. Hours passed without the slightest noise. Alice dozed. Jordan lived almost in the living room, with the lights on as well. He paced incessantly from one end to the other, with tireless obstinacy. The carpet muffled his steps. At times, he entered the bedroom and carried on his silent sway next to the bed, looking at his woman every time he walked in her direction. Soon, Alice started to have hallucinations, floaty and confused at first, then descending to ground level. The young woman, with her eyes wide open, did nothing but look at the carpet on either side of the headboard of the bed. One night, suddenly she remained staring. After a while, she opened her mouth to scream, and her nose and lips beaded with sweat. "Jordan! Jordan!" she claimed, frozen with fright, staring at the carpet. Jordan ran to the bedroom, and when she saw him appear, Alice shrieked with horror. "It's me, Alice, it's me!" Alice looked at him in confusion, looked at the carpet, looked at him again, and after a long moment of stupefied confrontation, she calmed down. She smiled and took her husband's hand in hers, caressing it tremblingly. Amongst her most persistent hallucinations, there was an anthropoid, leaning on the carpet, on its toes, its eyes fixed on her. The medics came back in vain. There was in front of them alive, waning, bleeding out day after day, hour after hours, without knowing how at all. In their last visit, Alice lied in a stupor while feeling for her pulse, trying on one side of her limp wrist after the other. Long time they observed her in silence and went into the dining room. His doctor shrugged his shoulders, discouraged. It's a serious case. There's little to do. Just what I needed! Jordan huffed and roughly tapped on the table. Alice was fading away into a state of delirium due to anemia, which worsened in the afternoon but always subsided in the early hours. During the day, her disease didn't progress, but every morning she was livid, almost in a syncope. It would seem that only at night her life drained away in new waves of blood. She always had the feeling of being collapsed in bed with £1,000,000 on top of her when she woke up. Since the third day, this sinking feeling never abandoned her. She could barely move her head. She didn't want her bed touched, not even a fluff to her pillow. Her twilight terrors advanced in the shape of monsters that crept to her bed and climbed up the quilt with difficulty. Then she lost her consciousness. The final 2 days, she raved incessantly in a low voice. The lights remained mournfully lit in their bedroom and the living room. In the agonizing silence of the house, nothing could be heard but the monotonous delirium coming from the bed and the muffled sound of Jordan's eternal footsteps. She died, at last. The maid, who came in later to unmake her bed, now alone, looked at the pillow in estrangement for a while.
Sir,
She called Jordan in a low voice.
in the pillow there are stains that look like blood.
Jordan came promptly and stooped over. In fact, in the pillowcase, at both sides of the hole that Alice's head left, bloodstains could be seen.
It looks like sting marks.
The maid murmured after a while of immobile observation. Hold it to the light, Jordan said. The maid did so, but at once dropped it and stared at him, livid and trembling. Without knowing why, Jordan felt his hair stand on end. What's there? Muttered in a hoarse voice.
It weighs too much,
Articulated the maid, still trembling. Jordan picked it up. It was extraordinarily heavy. In the dining table, Jordan cut through the pillowcase and the lining in a single stroke. The top feathers flew, and the maid cried in horror with her whole open mouth, bringing her clenched hands to her buns. Over the bottom, among the feathers, slowly wiggling hairy legs, there was a monstrous animal, a viscous, living ball. So swollen it was that its mouth was barely visible. Night after night, ever since Alice was bedridden, it had stealthily applied its mouth, its trunk, better said, on her temples, sucking her blood. The bite was almost imperceptible. The daily removal of the pillow hindered its development without doubt. But ever since the young lady became unable to move, the suction was vertiginous. In 5 days, in 5 nights, it had emptied Alice. These bird parasites, tiny in their usual habitats, can reach enormous proportions under certain conditions. Human blood seems to be particularly favorable to them, and it is not uncommon to find them in feather pillows. I hope you enjoyed my reading of The Feather Pillow by Horacio Quiroga. The translation was made by yours truly. I didn't feel like straying away from games related content, but felt a desire to try my hand at this kind of videos. Every now and again I'll bring a short story, wishing to send a shiver down your spine. If there's any scary short story you want to recommend, please tell me in a comment below. After this, if you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like, a comment, or subscribing. You don't know how powerful your support may be. Thanks for watching.